Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The town of Taber has joined Lethbridge in making wearing masks mandatory during the COVID-19 pandemic. Federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole blasted the Liberals today on the delay of getting the COVID-19 vaccine to Canadians. And the Insurance Bureau of Canada has come out with its list of our country's most stolen vehicles. We will have details in business news.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Springs Church in Winnipeg is taking legal action against the government of Manitoba, which issued new public health orders saying drive-in church services cannot be held during the COVID-19 pandemic. The CEO of Miracle Channel and senior pastor of Springs Church, Leon Fontaine, says the step was necessary since they were not getting anywhere with Manitoba's health minister, Cameron Friesen, to find a positive path forward. Pastor Leon says this is about fighting for the constitutional rights and freedoms for Canadians.
COVID-19 presents a serious threat to the health and economy of our province. We all have a role to play in combating the spread of COVID-19, which is why our church has complied with every public health rule the government has put forward to bend the curve. We also know that many people are struggling with the many challenges that accompany COVID-19 lockdowns. This is why our church has worked diligently to find innovative ways to support the needs of our community while complying with government advice on stopping the spread of COVID-19. These range from curbside grocery pickup for hurting families to drive-in worship services. The government has established rules which prohibit people from gathering with people who aren't members of their household. They have deemed these rules sufficient to keep people safe as they drive to the liquor, cannabis, or big box retail store, park their car, and enter those facilities. If this is the case, we have to ask ourselves why the government has deemed it unsafe for Manitobans to drive to their place of worship with their windows rolled up for the entirety of a service and practice their faith. We believe this is an oversight on the part of the government of Manitoba, as other provinces across Canada have made accommodations for drive-in worship services while working to stop the spread of COVID-19.
So far, the Manitoba government has fined Springs Church over $20,000 for hosting drive-in services. Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister said the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions on retail operations and the size of gatherings could continue for quite some time. The province announced 16 more deaths yesterday, along with 283 new cases of the novel coronavirus. The Alberta government announced that there were 1,685 new cases of the novel coronavirus today, including 10 new deaths. Across the province, there are 17,144 active cases. Close to 44,000 people have also recovered from the virus. The Edmonton zone still leads the way with 7,857 active cases, followed by the Calgary zone with 6,331. The South zone has 663 cases, including 213 here in Lethbridge. The province announced today that it has assembled a new vaccine task force. Premier Jason Kenney says a COVID-19 vaccine will be available to all Albertans by next summer at 30 vaccine depots. Health Minister Tyler Shandro says the first shipments for frontline workers and the most vulnerable will arrive in January.
These vaccines will not be shipped all at once, but in multiple shipments over several months. The Pfizer vaccine will go directly to 30 different administration sites around the province, and the Ministry of Health has already begun acquiring the necessary ultra-low temperature freezers to store the Pfizer shipments at these sites. We'll also expect to receive enough doses of the Moderna vaccine to immunize even more Albertans during the first quarter of 2021.
The province is also asking for help from the Red Cross in Ottawa for potential field hospitals should our current health system become overwhelmed with patients. The town of Taber in southwestern Alberta has brought forth a mandatory face covering bylaw. The town has seen rising cases of COVID-19. Taber now has 101 active cases of the virus. There have also been 4 COVID-related deaths. The bylaw will require the use of facial coverings for everyone over the age of 10 in all indoor enclosed public places or in a public vehicle such as a bus.
It has gone up 7 times what the average was previously. Or with that, we consulted with our local medical professionals as well as our health services. And the general consensus was that we should incorporate this bylaw as soon as possible under the circumstances there. So we as a council, for the ultimate health, safety, and well-being of our Taborn area residents, felt that this was a necessary move to make for the benefit of our whole community and area.
The bylaw allows for enforcement for violations with a fine of $100. A note from the Lethbridge School Division that a 4th case of COVID-19 has been identified at Joyce Fairburn Middle School in Lethbridge. Being that there are 2 or more confirmed cases, the province has declared an outbreak at the school. At-home learning began on November 30th for students in grades 7 and 8 as per the government's mandatory restrictions. The Lethbridge School Division also said an outbreak has been declared at Dr. Probe Elementary School. The appropriate parties are now self-isolating. Alberta Health Services announced that they are dealing with a number of coronavirus cases at Aged Care Sunrise Gardens in Brooks. There are currently 7 cases linked to an outbreak. 1 person has died, 2 cases are active, and 4 people have since recovered. Meanwhile, in Edmonton, which leads the province with active COVID-19 cases, they've renewed their face covering bylaw in all indoor places and public vehicles until December 31st of 2021. City officials can vote to repeal the bylaw at any time should conditions warrant that action. More than 10,000 people have enrolled in an Alberta pilot project that tests travelers for COVID-19 at the Calgary International Airport. The province has not released specifics about how they tested positive for the virus, but officials say the rate was quite low. They say more data will be released once more people have participated. The testing is a partnership between the Alberta and federal governments and is offered to travelers arriving by air in Calgary and by land at the Coots border crossing in southern Alberta. Alberta RCMP say a 45-year-old man has been charged in a collision that left 2 teenagers dead and a 3rd seriously injured. The Mounties say a 17 and 16-year-old from Sherwood Park were killed when a pickup truck in the wrong lane hit an SUV head-on near Fort Saskatchewan. A 15-year-old girl from Fort Saskatchewan also suffered life-threatening injuries in the September 17th accident. Police say Christopher Rempel of Cairn, Port Saskatchewan faces charges including impaired driving and dangerous driving causing death. The Lethbridge Police Association says that 22-year Lethbridge Police veteran David Easter has been cleared of an assault charge relating to an incident in February of this year. Easter was originally charged while working in the cell block at the LPS when the alleged assault occurred. Upon review by the Crown prosecutors, it was determined that the actions of Constable Easter did not warrant a criminal charge of any kind, and the case was withdrawn on December 2nd. Easter's suspension without pay is expected to be reviewed as well. Honker's Pub and Eatery in Lethbridge was forced to shut down for a few days after a break-in that caused severe damage to the pub. As Micah Quinn explains now, the community has stepped up with helping out this local restaurant.
This is security footage from the morning of November 29th when 2 men backed into the front of Honker's Pub and Eatery and made off with the ATM and cash inside of it.
It's just heartbreaking. There's nothing else more than that, right? We know that he was here a few hours prior, blocking out all the cameras in the front of the building, and then coming back a couple hours later and backing into the building. So, I mean, I would assume that he was here prior, only for the fact that the entire time of the vehicle backing into the building and him getting the ATM and leaving was only 45 seconds. So he knew definitely what he was here for.
Honker's reopened to the public on December 1st with a new makeshift sign. And a GoFundMe has been started for Honker's that has raised just over $14,000 so far.
I've always participated in a GoFundMe when it's time to give, but when it was time to receive, I had a really tough time with that. When I got wind that it actually went up, I actually called and said, I really appreciate everything you're doing, but we need to take it down. That's just not my thing. We don't know what's happening yet. We have to wait to see what happens for insurance. And of course there's damages that are out of pocket. Absolutely there will be on anything like this.
There are deductibles for the business that still need to be covered.
So we're just in the process with that as well, because it was an ATM, because it was our ATM, and then it's our money that was in there. So it could be a whole different can of worms, but we'll just kind of see how it all unfolds and we'll go from there.
The investigation is ongoing, and anyone who has information is asked to call Lethbridge Police or Crime Stoppers. For Bridge City News, I'm Mike Quinn.
Former NHL player and Southern Alberta native Christopher Steig recently placed 3rd in a TV figure skating competition called Battle of the Blades. As a finalist, Versteeg raised $15,000 towards the Opicus and Early Intervention Society, which helps Aboriginal kids. The two-time Stanley Cup champ also spoke about the upcoming NHL season potentially not occurring. Terms of the agreement with the NHL and NHLPA were settled 4 months ago, but now the league is hoping to get $300 million in concessions from the players. That entertains the idea that if a deal with the NHLPA is not reached on the return to play, there may not be any hockey this season.
Yeah, I know for me, there's no way. Even if I was in the NHL somehow, up until this point, this would have for sure did it in for me. I would be done. Like, I'm sure a lot of players in their mid-30s won't be back in the league now. Number one, because teams won't pay the salaries. The teams won't have the money to pay older players now. So you're going to even see a younger league, I think, next year because of the players they're going to have to whittle out of the league, players of the caliber of me at this age group that they just can't afford now, whether it be insurance-wise or salary-wise.
Last April, the players agreed to accept a 28% pay cut due to the fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. When it comes to helping young men realize their true potential, there's a Christian organization in Saskatchewan which is doing its part to help. Dallas Block with Rock Solid Refuge says this group tries to help young men aged 13 to 18 grow into responsible adults.
So obviously they're coming for a reason. Things aren't going well in their lives or in their families and their situation. And at some level or another, we want to help them see what their responsibility is. As they grow into young men, we want them to mature and become people who not only see what they need to take care of for themselves, but also see the world around them and where is it that they're supposed to contribute and be productive members of society even, and really be a blessing rather than what their lives were.
Catch the full interview with Dallas Block from Rock Solid Refuge and Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. Farming Smarter had plans to host in-person conferences today at Exhibition Park, but with provincial restrictions not allowing banquet-style events, the organization was pushed to an entirely virtual event. Organizers say that farmers are actually benefiting from an online experience because it's allowing for better networking.
Had we been only in person, the networking actually would have been fairly restricted because when we were in the trade show presentations, there was no, like, people weren't allowed to move around. They had to sit in their own chair. They weren't allowed to sort of switch seats with anybody, that kind of stuff. So this maybe perhaps is a little bit better for the networking just in the situation that we're in right now. In a rural community setting, it's tougher for those folks necessarily to stay connected with other people. So if we can help bridge that gap and create some networking opportunities, that's where we're going to try and help.
Farming Smarter is hosting 14 virtual speakers throughout today and tomorrow. If you're not sure about Nikiyuko Japanese Garden in Lethbridge being open during the COVID-19 pandemic, you'll be happy to know that the Winter Lights Festival is a go. Now, you cannot enter with a group larger than 10 people, but the garden is still able to host its grand opening tomorrow.
We've heard time and time again from people that like this is a family tradition for them and that they come with their families every year. And we're so grateful that we're able to do that again this year. We hope that people are going to come out again this year. Like 2020 has been really rough for a lot of people. And so we're just hoping to kind of provide a little bit of a bright light, so to speak, in everybody's lives and hopefully distract them from the stresses that have happened this year, and maybe people can relax and just spend some time with their loved ones.
Tickets are only available online. In-person tickets will not be available at the garden due to safety protocols. Federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole says Canadians will not get a COVID-19 vaccine as soon as other countries because the Liberals wasted time on a deal with CanSino Biologics that fell through. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Ottawa signed deals with several vaccine manufacturers, with 4 candidates being reviewed by Health Canada right now.
7 months ago, the Prime Minister announced with great fanfare their joint venture on a vaccine with China. Now, the China deal fell apart at the end of the summer, and since then, they've been scrambling to come up with plans for a vaccine. Why did the Prime Minister put the lives of Canadians in the hands of communist China when it came to a COVID vaccine?
The opposition shouldn't just make stuff up. The fact is that we secured contracts for vaccines in August. And right now we are moving forward with the approvals for 4 different vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and now Johnson & Johnson at Health Canada, so that we can be sure that as soon as those vaccines arrive, we will be able to deliver them to Canadians.
Now, one of our regular political contributors, Brian Lilly, says it appears as though most Canadians will not have access to that COVID-19 vaccine until possibly September, and that does not sit well with many.
The Prime Minister last Friday went further and said he hopes that more than half of Canadians can get the vaccine by September if everything goes to plan. Well, things rarely go to plan. I really hope it does go to plan. In fact, I hope the plan's even better than expected. But half by next September, that is 10 months away. And I don't think that's going to be acceptable to an awful lot of Canadians when they start seeing Brits and Americans getting vaccinated before Christmas.
Later in our show, Mr. Lilly will also talk about a new Angus Reid poll which discusses how the popularity of certain premiers is plummeting. The Trudeau government says it will not be able to meet its goal of lifting boil water advisories on every First Nation by next March. Officials say at least 22 boil water advisories remain in place because the COVID-19 pandemic has thrown a wrench into efforts to upgrade water systems and to carry out on-site training. Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller announced new funding today to tackle the issue. The feds managed to lift 97 boil water advisories since 2016, while 59 still remain in place. The U.S.'s top doctor says the Trump administration is preparing to roll out millions of COVID-19 vaccine doses. Dr. Anthony Fauci says frontline healthcare workers and vulnerable populations are among those expected to be the first in line.
Towards the middle and end of December, we will be having available about 40 million doses of vaccines for 20 million people that will be allocated to the states according to population. And then locally, you'll have the option with recommendations from the CDC and the ACIP, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, to make the distribution according to the high priority groups. As we get into January, February, and March, and we get more and more of the priority groups, we will soon, as we get into April, have vaccines for the general population.
An airport in Belgium was preparing to transport millions of coronavirus vaccines to countries throughout Europe today. The European Union Drug Agency said it may wait another 4 weeks, however, to decide whether to grant its first approval of the vaccine, even as authorities in the UK and the US continue to aim for a green light before Christmas. The European Medicines Agency plans to convene a meeting by December 29th to decide if there's enough safety data about the vaccine developed by Pfizer and BioNTech for it to be approved.
It's like prepare for a tsunami and not knowing when it is coming. Of course, we think it will come in January, but we are prepared for this tsunami of vaccines.
The European Medicines Agency also said it could decide by January 12th on whether to approve a rival shot by American pharmaceutical company Moderna. Well, if you live in southwestern Alberta, I hope you had a chance to get outside and enjoy some of that beautiful warm temperature, especially all the sunshine. We could be seeing double-digit temperatures for most of the week. A complete look at the weather picture is coming up. You know, this is the kind of fall day we all look forward to. Enjoy some time outside, maybe take the dog for a walk. Warm with a fairly clear sky. Now, Jeanette Rocher is here with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, along with those mild temperatures comes those strong Chinook winds once again.
Yeah, and we are going to be seeing evidence of that tonight and tomorrow. Hal, into this evening, wind gusts around 50 Not too bad considering it's Lethbridge. Into tomorrow, though, that's where we will see those gusts up to 70 kilometers per hour at times. 13 degrees, though, as we climb into those teen temperatures for Thursday. Sunny skies, sunshine remaining through Friday and the rest of the weekend. 9 degrees is our high for Friday, and then look at those temperatures for Saturday and Sunday. Saturday's high 14, 12 degrees the high on Sunday, 13 for Monday under partly cloudy skies and a mix of sun and cloud also expected on Tuesday with a high of 11 degrees. Not too bad. I will certainly take those beautiful double digits considering we are already into December. So the average high for this time of year is 1 degree, so we're reaching temperatures well above that. Minus 10 is the average low. 15 was our high temperature back in 1941, and it was a chilly minus 32 back in 1950. 8:09 a.m. is when the sun woke up this morning in our Wednesday evening sunset, that is, at 4:34 p.m. So giving us just over 8 hours of daylight. Looking to the west coast as we look into tomorrow, a chance of rain expected in Victoria, high of 9 degrees. 8 degrees is the expected high in Vancouver with a mix of sun and cloud. Beautiful sunny day tomorrow across Alberta. Edmonton's high 7 degrees. It could feel a bit of wind chill there. Calgary looking at the teen temperatures as well with a high of 13. Now Calgary could get a bit of wind gusts as well, up to 50k per hour, because they do experience those Chinooks as well. 0 is the high for Saskatoon. Sunny skies there. Sunshine expected in Regina with a high of 2 degrees. Both of these cities expecting wind chill tomorrow as well. 1 degree the high in Winnipeg with a mix of sun and cloud. Now we see more precipitation as we head further east here. Toronto, extreme clouds tomorrow. 3 degrees is the high for Ottawa. Chance of flurries tomorrow. Chance of showers expected in Montreal with a high of 4 degrees. And as we look into Atlantic Canada, Fredericton, lots of sunshine. Pretty much the only place though. 5 degrees is the high there. 6 for Halifax. Halifax can see some rain. Rain also expected tomorrow in Charlottetown with a high of 5. And St. John's will experience some drizzle as well. They could see 5 to 10 millimeters of rain tomorrow with a high of 12 degrees. So there you go. That is your forecast.
Today's weather is brought to you, rain or shine, by the Gym in the North. Start your New Year's resolution today.
The Insurance Bureau of Canada has released its annual list of the top 10 most stolen vehicles. And this year's list is made up almost entirely of Ford F-Series and Dodge Ram pickup trucks in Alberta. The Bureau says a lot of trucks in the province are quite attractive to thieves. It says the 3 main types of auto thefts across Canada this year were electronic theft of vehicles from a driveway, high-end vehicles stolen by organized crime groups, along with vehicles stolen for street racing. The CEOs of Hudson's Bay, Canadian Tire and IKEA Canada are among 50 retailers demanding the Ontario government lift COVID-19 restrictions for non-essential stores. They claim the province's decision was made matters worse. The group says people from Toronto and Peel region are going into fewer big box stores and flooding adjacent communities, which potentially creates a greater health risk. The retailer says this is happening because thousands of small independent stores that sell many of the same products are closed. Premier Doug Ford says the measures are aimed at limiting the spread of COVID-19 to protect everyone's health and well-being. National Bank of Canada is reporting a fourth quarter profit of $492 million. Now that's actually down from the $604 million a year ago. Revenue from the Montreal-based bank rose from $1.91 billion last year to $2 billion this year. The bank's provisions for credit losses increased to $110 million from $89 million a year ago. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 61 points on the day to finish at 17,358. The Dow was up 59 points to 29,883. The S&P 500 was up 6 points to 3669, and the Nasdaq was down 5 points to 12,349. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 37 cents to 44.92 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 13 cents to 2.75 US. Gold was down 39 cents to 18.30.90 US an ounce. And silver was down a cent to 24.09 US an ounce. Wheat is at $272 per metric ton, barley's at $275, canola's at $5.82, and corn is at $293 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 75 cents to $113.93, feeder cattle were up 15 cents to $141.80, and lean hogs were down 88 cents on the day to $67.88. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 77.40 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Springs Church in Winnipeg has filed an injunction against the Government of Manitoba, which issued new public health orders saying drive-in church services cannot be allowed during the COVID-19 pandemic. The CEO of Miracle Channel and senior pastor of Springs Church, Leon Fontaine, says this step was necessary since they were not getting anywhere with Manitoba's health minister, Cameron Friesen. Pastor Leon says this is about fighting for the constitutional rights and freedoms for all Canadians. There's a Christian organization in Saskatchewan which is helping teen boys realize their true potential. Coming up, Jeanette Rocher interviews Dallas Block with Rock Solid Refuge. We'll have more details. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Southern Alberta Ethnic Association is hosting their 22nd annual Community Christmas Dinner to Go on Saturday, December 19th from 3 to 6 p.m. at the Multicultural Center in downtown Lethbridge. Last year, over 400 people attended this annual dinner, and with the impact of COVID-19 on Lethbridge, they're looking to the community for donations of goods, grocery gift cards, or funds to purchase items for the dinner. If you wish to donate, contact the SAEA by December 7th. For more information, call 403-320-1577 or email info@saea.ca. Shop of Wonders is looking for volunteers to help bring some Christmas cheer to families who need a special something this year. This is a My City Care initiative through My Victory Church in Lethbridge, which helps to give people hope and a hand up. Volunteers will wrap gifts, entertain kids, and assist with other tasks. To learn more about this opportunity, call Carol at 403-942-1378 or email carol@myvictory.ca. Get out and explore nature. The Helen Schuler Nature Center is offering guided 1-hour field trips for all ages. Visit lethbridge.ca/things to do. Click on Nature Center and follow the events page, where you'll find a list of featured tours that will introduce you to amazing plants and animals found right here in Lethbridge. Cost is $35. Book online for your tour today. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
What do you do when you see your teenage son falling deep into addictions like drugs, alcohol, and pornography? A parent could be left feeling overwhelmed and helpless, but there is hope. For over 10 years, Rock Solid Refuge has been the residential program of choice by families as a faith-based solution for 13 to 18-year-olds with addictions, behavior, or substance abuse issues. Joining us today via Skype from Shaunavon, Saskatchewan is the founder and executive director of Rock Solid Refuge, Dallas Block. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, it's good to be with you, even from a distance like this.
Absolutely. Now tell us about what led you to starting Rock Solid Refuge.
My wife and I had gotten involved working with young people in some local churches that we were a part of, worked as a youth pastor for a number of years. And during the time while I was youth pastoring, a young man that I knew, and I knew his family, got caught up in crystal meth. So at 16 years old, he was a crystal meth addict. And his family exhausted all of the resources that were available to them at that time. And because I was a close family friend, I ended up quite involved in that whole journey. And after exhausting all of those resources for a teenager and realizing there's no long-term treatment program, especially Christian-based in Canada, we said, hey, let's see if we can start one. And so that started the journey of starting Rock Solid Refuge.
Amazing. Now tell us why you focus on boys ages 13 to 18 for this residential program.
Yeah, you know, really what it came down to was when you see young people in trouble, you have to start somewhere. And so we started just working with guys, and really our heart is for all young people across Canada that are struggling with life-controlling issues of all kinds. And so, Lord willing, if we get an opportunity, we will work with girls as well, whether on this campus that we currently have or other campuses that God gives us the opportunity to open up across Canada.
Mm-hmm. And do you know if there's a similar program like this for adolescent girls who are struggling? Why is this, specifically targeted for boys?
As far as we know, parents are having to reach outside of Canada to find a program for teen girls that is, long-term Christian residential treatment based. So it's a huge need, and it's just simply not being met at this time.
That's unfortunate. Now, you mentioned Rock Solid Refuge is faith-based. So what principles are the foundation for this work?
We really look at the principles of responsibility, maturity, and charity as being kind of the foundation of what our goals are for the young people that come into Rock Solid Refuge. And so obviously they're coming for a reason. Things aren't going well in their lives or in their families and their situation. And at some level or another, we want to help them see what their responsibility is. As they grow into young men, we want them to mature and become people who not only see what they need to take care of for themselves, but also see the world around them and where is it that they're supposed to contribute and be productive members of society even, and really be a blessing rather than what their lives were, which was really quite a struggle and a challenge for the people around them. We hold students accountable to honesty and to respect and obedience, and those are kind of foundational principles for us here. And we work primarily through the three basic means of role modeling, relational influence, and authority. And so we see that as kind of like a three-legged stool that we want to keep in balance at all points. We're a highly relational program. But even as we look at those things, being a distinctly Christian program, we see that all through the lens of a Christian worldview, understanding that our God is a God of grace and truth.
Okay, so Dallas, explain maybe what happens when a boy first enters Rock Solid Refuge.
To be honest with you, the first day at Rock Solid Refuge is actually a bit traumatic. For parents, they're bringing their young person, sometimes from across Canada, to this place that many would say is in the middle of nowhere, because Southwest Saskatchewan is a pretty wide open country. And so here they are bringing their young person to our location, and they're really signing them over into the care of people that they don't know. And so it's a pretty traumatic experience actually for the parents. There's often tears, and for the young person, everything that they know is kind of being taken away from them. There's everything that they're familiar with is kind of gone. They lose their cell phone. That's pretty traumatic as well. But we work pretty hard really quickly to help them understand that this is a place that they'll be safe. This is a place where there is relationships. This is a place where people will like them and enjoy working with them. It is a structured environment, but it's a structured environment where they can find help and healing.
I would imagine that's extremely traumatic, because I would imagine some of those kids are there not willingly, right? Like their parents are kind of making them do this, and maybe they're addicted to a drug that they no longer have access to. Like that's got to be crazy hard for the staff too to deal with. You must have addiction specialists and all kinds of stuff there.
Yeah, I mean, every student does sign in, and they recognize that they're kind of in a position where their options are pretty narrow because the struggle and the challenges have gotten pretty drastic in their situation. So they do sign in, but it is, often kind of like a last resort for all of them. And so it is a struggle. And at the end of the day, like I said, our staff work hard relationally as fast as possible. And that's really what becomes kind of the foundation of all the other work that we're able to do with the students, is that they recognize that we really actually do care and we want their best interests. So that really gets us a long ways, actually fairly quickly.
And the boys that come to the refuge, you provide school education, so they're not falling behind even further in school. Can you maybe tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, that's been an incredible journey for us as well. We were able to get our accreditation with the Ministry of Education in Saskatchewan really early on in our time of running this ministry. And the Ministry of Education in Saskatchewan has been a great partner in the work that we do. They really get what we do because they understand that the kinds of young people we work with here are the kinds that are falling through the cracks in the public system. And so they're excited to work with us. We have a fully accredited school, grades 7 to 12 we can teach. So whatever grade level that students are in when they come, they just pick up from where they're at. Our teachers assess those things and then just get them going in their education. It's also one of the areas that is the quickest place to see some change happen and some hope come into them. A lot of them have been labeled as maybe not very smart, maybe they didn't do very well in school, but truthfully, it has nothing to do with intelligence. It's opportunity, it's surroundings, it's choices, and now they have that opportunity in a setting that really gives them the ability to succeed in education.
That's very inspiring. Now, Dallas, you also have an equine-assisted therapy program, right? So tell us what the boys learn from this and its impact on them.
Yeah, that's been incredible as well. So we've been able to do horse riding here for a bit, but this past summer we were able to start an actual equine therapy component. And so one of our staff became our full-time equine facilitator. And so when a new student would come in, he would just spend the morning, his first morning would be with our equine facilitator and with horses. And it's just kind of eased that transition incredibly. And so, you know, rather than kind of coming up to lunch their first day, kind of, you know, still not sure about being here and everything, these guys are coming in from outside just excited about what they just got to do, not only with the equine facilitator, but with these animals that are just amazing and incredible creatures.
It's amazing what horses can do, what an animal can do to boost your mood, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how long do the boys stay with you?
We are a 12-month program, and so our program is structured around 6 different levels, and each level just has a different amount of time that is expected of it, but we really believe that lasting change takes time. It's not enough just for them to come off of the substances and that the chemical addiction is broken, but rather lifestyle choices and really a new lifestyle has to come into play. And we also want to work with just fundamental beliefs. And so it's an incredible joy to us when we see the students being willing to wrestle with their fundamental belief system as a way for them to see change come into their lives.
So are the boys that come to you only from Christian homes? Not necessarily, right?
No, we're open to young people coming here from all kinds of backgrounds. So a young person's background has nothing to do with whether or not they'd be accepted into the program here. And we're just excited to get applications of people that are in need and see how we can serve them. There's plenty of times we've had students that have come and, you know, if you gave them a Bible and said, "Can you find the book of Genesis for me?" They'd be like, "I don't know what Genesis is." And that's fine. We're glad to just kind of take a journey with them and explore what the Christian faith is all about.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned that you're in the middle of nowhere, so Shaunavon, Saskatchewan, but of course you also said that it's not just kids from Saskatchewan that are coming, they're coming from all over Canada. So what's your capacity and are you looking to expand?
Yeah, our capacity is actually just 10 students at this point, so it's a pretty small student body. And yes, we are definitely looking to expand. Really, our greatest challenge with that is just resources. It's financial. We really believe that we have the program, kind of the structure that we would need to expand what we're doing. Finding staff, I think there's people out there that are passionate about what we're doing and would love to come on board with us to be a part of what we're doing here. And facilities can be built. And so our hope is, Lord willing, that we'll be able to build more houses out here. And so, you know, we kind of see the ideal group size as being around 8 students in a group. And so building houses out here so that we would have the capacity of 30 to 40 young people, guys and girls, in fact, would be kind of our ideal to see this site developed. And then we'd love to see an opportunity to open up campuses in other parts of Canada.
Mm-hmm. Now, with a capacity of only like 8 to 10 students, you must have a long waiting list.
Yeah, I mean, the waiting list fluctuates. It goes up and down, but currently, yes, there is a pretty long waiting list right now. So it's really sad when we get phone calls and we say, well, it's going to be a few months before we have a bed available. We are actually working right now to open up 4 extra beds even in the new year. So we're hoping that in January we'll have 4 extra beds to offer. We have a house on our campus that we're going to repurpose into a transition house. And so we'll be able to at least serve 4 more. And Lord willing, as resources come in, we will expand and work with more young people.
Right. Do you have any success stories that you could share?
Yeah, a couple of them that come to mind right away are, right now we have 4 either staff or interns that are previous students from here. And so, you know, 4 of these young people that we had in our program, they graduated. Some of them went on to other things and then came back as full-time staff. We have a couple of interns as well. And it's just incredible to see them come into this place and want to give of themselves for the good of the young people that come into it, which really fits our model of, you know, responsibility, maturity, and charity, right? And so they become a really amazing example to the students that are in the program as well. Another couple of just amazing success stories, and this is really the heart of what we do, which is 2 of our guys that are here right now recently gave their hearts to the Lord Jesus Christ. And so those are just some of those moments where you're like, this is why we do what we do. And one of those guys shared in a church just recently that we did a presentation in, and part of what he put into his presentation was he was just amazed at how God has changed his desires, that he wants to do things differently. He doesn't want to go back to the old way that he was, even though he knows when he first came to Rock Solid, he just wanted to get through it and get back to his old life. That's not his desire anymore. So those are those times when we're just so amazed by what God is doing in this place.
So Dallas, how can viewers help your cause in rescuing teenaged boys from addictions?
Check us out online. rocksolidrefuge.com is our website. We've actually got a lot of resources there as well. So parents who might be struggling with a teenager, maybe it's not to the point where you need kind of some residential treatment or something like that. We also have some other resources that are available for parents. We want people to get familiar with who we are and what we offer in some of those ways as well. We also really do need financial partners. We have a student sponsorship program called Partner for Change. You'll find that on our website. We need monthly donors as well as one-time donors to help us. And hey, you know what? We're going into the Christmas season. We really want to be giving families the opportunity to have hope. So if you're really enjoying some great family time, remember those who are having more of a struggle of it. You might be in crisis. And we're helping a lot of those situations.
Thank you so much, Dallas, for your time. It looks like we are out of time, unfortunately, but Dallas Block with Rock Solid Refuge out of Shaunavon, Saskatchewan. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
There is a lot of water cooler chatter as to when Canadians will receive the COVID-19 vaccine. Some have speculated that it won't be until September, while the Trudeau government assures us it may come sometime in the first quarter. To discuss this in more detail is one of our regular contributors. Brian Lilly joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, the US and UK could start their vaccinations next week, so why the delay for Canadians?
There's a lot of reasons for this, including the fact that we don't have a company that's making the vaccine here. We do have domestic vaccine manufacturers, but we don't have one of the leading companies like Pfizer making it here or Moderna making it here. So these are being made elsewhere. We are not at the back of the line, as some have said, but we're nowhere near the front. And while the US and UK could start vaccinating this week or late next or early next week, the UK are already booking appointments for their high priority patients. The US looking at a December 11th or 12th rollout. Well, we're stuck wondering, will we even be getting significant amounts in the third quarter? The Trudeau government has started to push back and saying, look, there's a lot of misinformation out there. And reporters simply said, okay, well, when will we get the vaccine? In the first quarter. Okay, January, February, March, in the first quarter. So we're now looking at 6 million doses, most likely of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, a split between those two. Those 6 million doses can vaccinate 3 million people, Hal, or 8% of the Canadian population. I know there's a percentage of the population that doesn't want the vaccine or doesn't want it early, but we're talking 3 million people. That would be our long-term care residents. That would be our frontline healthcare workers and paramedics and others that are at higher risk for this. That is not significant enough to start getting life back to normal. And we keep being told, well, we need this vaccine to get life back to normal. The Prime Minister last Friday went further and said he hopes that more than half of Canadians can get the vaccine by September if everything goes to plan. Well, things rarely go to plan. I really hope it does go to plan. In fact, I hope the plan's even better than expected. But half by next September, that is 10 months away. And I don't think that's going to be acceptable to an awful lot of Canadians when they start seeing Brits and Americans getting vaccinated before Christmas.
I'm wondering if we potentially may see some of the vaccine being sold on the black market from the US to get into Canada for people who are more desperate for the COVID-19 vaccine here, Brian. Now, there was also apparently a deal for Canada to make a vaccine with China. Many are kind of scratching their heads over that deal. Maybe it's a little ironic here. And the deal fell through. What happened?
So that was a deal that was announced in the spring between the National Research Council, Dalhousie University down in Halifax, and a Chinese company called CanSino Biologics. Now, this is a company that, of course, being a Chinese company, they have ties to the Chinese military, they have ties to the Communist Party of China. That worried a lot of people, but they began initial trials and an investigation into the vaccine. I believe Canada even shipped some biological material to China to help with the development of the vaccine. And then suddenly in May, China pulled out and said, we won't be sharing this information with you. We are not going to allow this to go forward. We will not issue export permits for their vaccine. The Chinese are using their own homemade vaccines, but they're not sharing them with us. I had a lot of questions about whether this was the right move. So did many others across Canada when this deal was first announced. Now, the problem, this relates to why we're not at the front of the line, is that as other companies started to develop vaccines, we didn't approach them until August, September. So later than other countries. That helps move us further back in the line. The Liberals will complain that, we're not at the back of the line. Sure, Malawi's behind us, but we're nowhere near the front. We're not where we should be.
Now, is there any truth to the claims that because of actions taken by previous governments, the Mulroney government, the Stephen Harper government, Canada cannot make the vaccines here?
Well, we can't make some of the vaccines here, but the claim being made by the Liberals and their supporters is that because of actions by the Harper Conservatives, that a lot of vaccine manufacturers pulled up shop and there's no vaccine manufacturing. The Prime Minister, in fact, has said there's no vaccine manufacturing in Canada. He knows that not to be true because he signed contracts with Canadian vaccine makers. There is a 10-year standing agreement for pandemic vaccines for influenza pandemic with GSK out of Quebec City and Sanofi Pasteur out of Toronto. There's also a company called Medicago out of Quebec City that they've signed contracts with. There are attempts to develop vaccines in Saskatchewan by a private company that I believe is affiliated with the University of Saskatchewan. So there are options in this country. Now, can they make the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, the two early ones? I'm told the answer is no, because it is such a new technology. It's called mRNA. And it's a different way of making vaccines. There are others that we could make here, and I'm told that we could make the AstraZeneca vaccine that was developed with Oxford University in Canada. But the Trudeau government did not sign manufacturing rights into their contracts, is what they have admitted. In this idea that we're going back to Brian Mulroney in 1989, the claim is, he sold off Connaught Labs to the French. That French company is called Sanofi Pasteur, and their North York, Toronto area lab is called the Connaught Campus. It's still there. It still makes vaccines. It doesn't make the Pfizer type vaccine or the Moderna one. So there's a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of things being peddled by people with political agendas from all sides.
Now, once the vaccines arrive, apparently there will be a large military component on delivering them. Brian, the Trudeau Liberals are following in the footsteps of Ontario Premier Doug Ford?
Yeah, they've both hired generals. So it was, I guess, a week and a half ago that Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced that he had hired former Chief of the Defence Staff Rick Hillier. And then last Friday, at the end of the week, it was Justin Trudeau's turn. And he's hired Major General Danny Fortin, former officer in the Canadian Armed Forces, who, by the way, served under Hillier twice, both in Afghanistan and when Hillier was the Chief of the Defence Staff. So the two men know each other. Hillier tells me that, they have a good working relationship. He said that he's got immense respect for him. People might be wondering why old military guys, why old generals are being called in for this. It's because they understand logistics. The military is very good at moving people and goods around the world, quite frankly. The old saying is, there's no army without beans and bullets. So you can get the troops there, but if you don't get the beans and the bullets there, the army's not moving, it's not fighting. So they know how to do these things. There's a lot of claims that, because in addition to these two generals, there's talk of using the Canadian Armed Forces to actually transport the vaccine, to get it into remote locales. That will be part of it, but there will also be a large private sector component. The Ontario government was touring a company called McKesson that regularly transports vaccines and other medical treatments across the country on a daily basis. But, there's a concern by some that says, if the military is involved, then that's because they're going to force it on us and make it mandatory, and the military will actually jab it into your arm whether you want it or not. I asked General Hillier about that. He said, give me a break. It's not going to happen. Jason Kenney, Alberta's premier, said it won't be a mandatory vaccine. Premier Doug Ford has said that. There is no legal basis for making a vaccine mandatory. Doesn't mean there may not be restrictions put in by certain groups to say, if you don't have your vaccine, you can't do this or that. But at this point, there's no move by a government to make it mandatory.
Brian, you've been quite outspoken on the Trudeau Liberals not releasing more data when it comes to COVID-19. This week, you reported on a somber stat which discusses the full impact the novel coronavirus has had on the entire country. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's a bit of data from Stats Canada called excess mortality or excess deaths. And before people who may have lost someone to COVID-19 get upset and think that this is somehow diminishing that. No, this is a measure that statisticians, that actuaries use to try and determine in any given year, any given month, any given week, how many deaths should be expected in the country, in certain regions of the country, by province, by territory. And what it allows them to do is say, well, okay, we were expecting 5,000 deaths in Ontario this month, and there's 11. What is going on? If they haven't noticed it already. What I found in this is that it really depends on where you live in the country. Now, we've had just over 12,000 COVID-19 deaths since the beginning of the pandemic in March. Since January, until the beginning of January until the beginning of September, Canada registered just 6,187 excess deaths. That means that about half of those who died of COVID probably would have died from the flu or pneumonia or something else in this given year. We know that the majority of people who have succumbed to COVID-19 have been in their mid-80s. They have multiple underlying conditions. This is something the Alberta government has been leading on in reporting that. Again, that doesn't diminish the fact that people have lost a loved one, but it does tell us who is most at risk. And what this excess death stat shows is that while Quebec has been extremely hard hit, accounting for about half of the excess deaths, other provinces have not been. Ontario, just 698 excess deaths in that time, despite about 3,000 COVID deaths. Now, when you look at Alberta in British Columbia, what you notice is that their excess deaths are well above the number of COVID deaths that they've had total. Let me just give you the stat: 767 excess deaths for Alberta, 907 for British Columbia. Compare that to 533 COVID deaths in Alberta and 395 in British Columbia. What that tells us is that there's something else going on, and we know that both of those provinces have discussed openly the fact that there have been big spikes in opioid deaths, in suicides. And so we need medical officials to start looking at that. Looking at stats in the middle of a pandemic and when you're talking about deaths can be cold, but it can also be very instructive and help officials in making better decisions, better choices going forward.
Brian, a new survey by Angus Reid says the popularity of our country's premiers is falling. Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister seems to be the least popular right now. Is this specifically because of the newest pandemic restrictions?
I think the pandemic restrictions, I think the spike in cases, perhaps the people of Manitoba, who for the most part seem to get off quite easily in the first round, are feeling that this is their government's fault. I'm not sure that we can blame all of COVID in any one region on the government. We can't blame COVID getting into the country entirely on the federal government or how it handled nursing homes entirely on provincial governments, but they all have specific areas of blame. But Brian Pallister is taking a beating here. He's at 32% voter approval rating. So only 32% think he's doing a good job. That is half of the leaders, which is British Columbia's John Horgan and Quebec's Francois Legault at 64%. And what's bizarre is that BC has started to see a spike in COVID-19 as well. They've begun imposing restrictions they didn't have before. But even stranger is that Quebec's Francois Legault remains one of the most popular premiers of the country. And this is the country that has European-style death rates, that has had the worst record when it comes to COVID-19, that has had some of the strictest lockdown measures. And it doesn't seem to matter what happens in Quebec. Francois Legault is well liked for the job that he's doing at the moment. Ontario Premier Doug Ford was up in the low 60s earlier in the pandemic. He's dropped a little bit down to 55%, and Alberta's Jason Kenney is down at 40%.
Brian, we only have about a minute left here. MPs are debating changing medical assistance and dying provisions with a deadline of December the 7th. Many, including Alex Schadenberg from Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, whom we've had on our show here, are really concerned since they say there is a new same-day death in the bill.
There are many concerns with this, and I've had MPs and senators raise it with me, including changes in who is allowed to seek medical assistance in dying. This should have been dealt with by the federal government appealing a lower court decision out of Quebec to the Supreme Court. They didn't do that. Some say that's because Justice Minister David Lametti, who was an advocate for medical assistance in dying, got the result that he wanted, and he's now applying this Quebec-only decision to the whole country, which allows people who are not at the foreseeable natural end of their life to also seek medical assistance in dying. So this could end up opening up a can of worms. The Conservatives, both in the Senate and the House, are trying to do what they can to slow it, to change it, to make sure that this bill doesn't make things worse.
One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly from the Toronto Sun. Thanks for your time, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.